Hi everybody and welcome to the video. I'll be showing you how to make a game ready asset in Blender and Marmoset Toolbag 4. And welcome back to the next session, next part of this video series. And in this one we need to do some preparation now that we have our high poly and our low poly. And what I've done, just to catch up, bring up to speed really, I've created two new collections, one called high poly and one called low poly. And I've placed each of the high poly into the high poly collection and all of the low parts, of course, into the low poly. I've also renamed these ones so that they actually have high at the end, not in the beginning or the middle of the name. So that brings you up to speed with what I've done there in terms of organizing our objects. So let me turn off the high poly version. We need to prep these low poly versions for baking, and that means we need to have UV maps. So we need to UV unwrap these, essentially. So to help me do that, I've enabled a couple of add-ons, and the other one is text tools, which you can see just there. So text tools and UV squares will help us out in the next stage. I come out of isolation. Let's select all of these objects. So I'm going to save that. So we've selected all of the low poly ones, and we're going to go into UV editing. That's everything there. And if we enable the N sidebar just here, on the text tools, we can click checker map. That will add a checker map onto our objects and show us what these actually look like. Not that great, to be fair. So the point of this checker map is that we can see we have some distortion here. These should be squares. So if we click here, so here's the checker map. You can see there it's all nicely squares, which is lovely. But on the model, we have these elongated kind of rectangles, which we don't want. We want to see squares as much as we can. So that's what we need to do to UV unwrap this. So let's close that down. I'm going to select all of these. If you just select all of these polygons now, you can see there, some of it's unwrapped already and some of it isn't. So with everything selected, I'm going to press U, unwrap. And of course, that's going to give us this, which isn't great. And actually, before we continue with that, let's make sure we don't have any more mirrors on these objects. And of course we do. You can see there we've got the checker override that was added by the that add-on there. And in fact, that one actually looks pretty good. You can see we have some nice squares there. This one not so much. This one's a mess, and that one's a mess. So a little bit of work to do. This one's not too bad at all, actually. Maybe the hole's in there, I'm not too sure. Needs some work. But either way, we'll work through this one at a time. So let's apply our mirror modifier on anything that has a mirror modifier on there. And of course these ones don't. So let's select all of these again. And tab into edit mode. And obviously if we unwrap any of this at the moment, it's not going to work very well, because you can see here we've got these really odd looking UVs which are not going to work at all. The reason for that is because we haven't defined any seams. So I'm going to head back to the layout view and let's pick one object. Let's start with this one, isolate that object and tab into edit mode. And at this point we want to select one of these edges, these sharp edges, up to the select menu and select sharp edges. Oops, not that, sorry. Select one of these and do select similar sharpness. So now we've got those, we're going to also convert these into seams. That's the word I'm looking for. So we can do mark seam as well. And seams are effectively where this will be cut up and laid flat into a 2D surface. So we may not need that seam there actually, so let's clear that seam there. So if we were to unwrap this now, we've added some seams. Let's see what happens. So with back to object mode, let's go to UV editing. Press D to select everything. Let's bring that into view there. Make that a little bit narrower. And let's hide the toolbar there. So if we press unwrap now with U, and we select unwrap, this is the result that we get. So we want to increase our margin. Don't forget to do that as well. So you can increase that to whatever value is good. Something like 0.1 looks good, it looks all right. Now, you recognize this part here, which is that part there. You can see there we've got some nice squares. So that's okay, even though it's slightly rotated. This one as well is okay. And that would be on the other side, of course. This is okay as well, within reason. This is terrible, and that's because that's what this is, essentially. So we can see, if I select these parts here, you can see that's where these are, which is really bad. So we need a few more seams, essentially. So let's pick some edges here and deselect these two and mark those as seams. Okay, so we've got that there now. Let's select everything again now. So 3A, and then press U to unwrap. And we now have this part in a much nicer configuration. Still not perfect. That's because it's wrapping around from that angle right through to the other side. But maybe we can use the, let's bring the sidebar back. Let's try to use UV squares and switch to island selection. So we can click this island here. There it is. And we can do snap with equal distance. And we have errors. Let's have a look at our mapping here. You can see it's not quite right. We've got quite a bit of distortion there, as we do up here, which is not great. And in fact, the reason that's distorting is because we haven't added any UV seams to that at all. So we can select these two edges, if I'm in the right mode, like that there, and right click and do mark seam. So if we unwrap this one more time, select 3 for faces, A for everything, U for unwrap. And you can see now we have this island here, which is the strip along the side here. Let's select everything again, select this island. So perhaps we can use text tools. I don't know if that has a straightening option in here. Let's have a look. I don't even know if this will work actually. I'm trying to move this window out the way here. In fact, let me just close that like that. Let's do that so we can see what's going on here. So we've got some nice tools here we can play around with. We've got color ID there as well, and baking and all sorts. You can actually bake normals and whatnot. That's really nice. We're not going to do that in this session. So what are the options we have here? We've got crop, fill, align to world, align to the top left corner, top right, and all this other stuff. Rotation, sort, centralize, random, rectify. Align selected UV faces or vertices to rectangular distribution. That sounds pretty good. Let's click that. And look at that. Would you believe it? It actually works. That's excellent. Let's see what happens if we try it on this part now. Maybe we need to have a few more cuts in here, seam wise. But let's try this anyway. Oh, there it is, rectify. It actually worked. And what does worry me though is this is all stretched, which is not ideal. So I think we've got a bit more work to do in closing and opening this up a bit more. I think it makes sense to add a seam here as well in the top part there. So in edge mode, I'm going to select this edge here, hold down Control, make a connection between these two edges, shift select that one, and then hold down Control again and select that one there. So now we're splitting it in this direction as well. Let's do mark seam. And I think that should be good. Let's select everything again U to unwrap, and of course it's going to mess up our previous fixes, but that's looking a lot better now, I think. Let's have a look. Let's first of all fix this one with rectify. So this set is pretty much done. Let's select this part here. Let me isolate that. Tab into edit mode, and in edge mode, select one of these edges and go to select, similar sharpness. And let's mark those as seams as well. I'm not sure that we need all these seams here as well, so I'm going to select these two edge loops there and clear those seams there. This should be very straightforward. This should actually work. All we need to do is add one more cut here. So we mark seam here, like so. 3 for face select, press A, U to unwrap, and there you go. That's actually unwrapped almost perfectly, apart from this little bit there. So let's rectify that as well, using our text tools rectify. That should look okay. I think that's fine. We've got some nice squares working there. Now this one seems to be okay as is, but I suspect all the UVs are overlapping, are sitting on top of each other effectively, which we don't want. Again, in edge mode, I'm not going to select all of the sharp ones this time. Apart from these, we're going to select the outer ones. Let me isolate this object first. Tab into edit mode. Let's make that a little bit bigger. And we're going to select this edge loop that runs all the way through the middle of our object. Okay, and hit mark seam. So that will effectively split it into two objects. And we need to split this as well here with these circles. And it makes sense to select these edge loops here. So that would be a separate piece essentially. I'm just going to go around and select all of these edges. Let's just focus in on that. Oops. Okay. Now we've got those selected. Let's right click and do mark seam. All that's left to do now is we have a circle here. That's a complete circle. So we need to add a couple of cuts to make that into a strip. So let's select these two edges and mark seam there. And do the same for these as well. Now we may have a bit more work to do. Oops, we missed a bit there. Let's make our selection here. And mark seam. So that'll be split off right down the middle, and that's good. However, I think with the back part here, this doesn't need to be a seam at all. So let's make a connection there, holding down the control key, select all of that, right click and clear seam. And we want, essentially we want these edges to be seams. So with that selected, we can continue down here. And right click and mark seam. So that in principle should unwrap in one piece. We could, if we want, put another cut there. In fact, we've got a cut there, haven't we, already? So let's leave that as is and see how that turns out. Right, face select, press A. Let's make this window a little bit smaller. We can see what our UV grid is doing when we unwrap this. So U for unwrap. And there we go. So we've got the sides of our blades. The holes look good there. These are the holes. And this is the back plate that we've just defined here. And these are the faces. If I select these two faces here, you can see they're right there. So that's really cool. That's worked out really well, actually. These look perfect, in fact. So let's just have a quick look at our checkerboard. Make sure that everything looks nice and squared off. no distortion, or very little distortion. So I think I'm going to call that good. Let's come out of object mode for that and come out of isolation. Let's head over back to layout, in fact. So we've done this, we've done that part, we've done this part. That just leaves the handle now. So let's head back over to, let's keep it in edit mode, UV editing mode. Let's isolate that. And like before, I'm going to select one sharp edge and select all of the similar ones like that. And let's mark those as seams. This is a real mess, this one. Let's see how this is going to be handled. And we don't need 2 seams here, so I think we'll select these. In fact, we'll select this one here. I think that's better. Yeah, that'd be a continuous surface and clear seam. All that's left to do is put a seam in the bottom there. So from here, hold down Control and click up to there. And we have that line going right along the length of the handle. And we can right click and do Mark Seam. So you can kind of figure out here, you can see now how that's going to unwrap. Hopefully that will work out okay. Let's go to 3 on the keyboard and press A. And then U to unwrap. Well, that's not too bad. So if I just deselect, you can see we have some nice squares. Very minimal distortion, which is excellent. Let's go back to object mode and come out of isolation. And let's review how this looks. We're not quite done yet. And the reason for that is because all of these take up the whole UV grid. And of course, we don't want that just for each object. We need to have them, we need to have all of these objects occupy the one space together as a group. So with all of these selected, I'm going to tab into edit mode, press 3 and then A to select everything, and press A on this side, select everything on over here. Let's close this this window just there, and let's repack this now. We can do average island scale first. That will basically make all of the sizes relative to each other. So essentially we have the same texel density or pixel density across the whole range of the model as a collective. Let's now pack out the islands. It will give us this option here. We can turn off rotate actually. And of course we want it to scale so that it actually packs it within that 1-to-1 grid. Let's try that. And that's fine, but we have a massive margin between all of the areas there. So, not too sure. It didn't really give me an option, did it? Pack islands. Ah, there's the island there, margin. So let's bring that down to 0.01. Let's make sure nothing else there. Okay. Yeah, that's not great. I have to be honest. It's far too close together. Let's do that again. And let's increase that to 0.02. And this is okay, but we're wasting a lot of space here. So why don't we try pack islands again, but this time turn on rotate and see how this packs after that. So that's better actually. Minor rotation on some elements. So I think we'll just go with that for the purpose of this demonstration, for this series. Let's head over back to the layout. And finally, before we can export this as all of these as an FBX that contains the high and the low parts, there's one final thing we need to do, and that's to assign some materials to our objects. So let's start with the high poly, and we select the blade here. And this one we're going to go over to the material tab, click new, and let's call that blade. Why not? Simple as that. Let's give that a color. Best to go for primary colors, I think, at this point. Why not? Let's do that. So we've got that one as bright red. Let's just copy that. Head over to viewport display and paste it in there, just so that we can see that doesn't show up at all. That's because we have it set to object, not material. So there's our red blade. Let's select the wooden part there. Click new material, and let's call that handle. I won't just use the primaries, I guess, but let's just make this something like that. And again, I want to copy that and paste it into the viewport display so you can see they're different colors. That's good. And now we have these two as well. I think we could join these into one object actually. Yeah, let's join these. So let's select that one first and then this one second. Control J. Let's call that handle parts. Oops. Underscore high. And give that a color as well. So give that a material. And let's call these handle parts. Oops. Let's change that into something like that. Let's copy that and paste it there. Hey, we've got the Joker colors. Who knew? Okay, so we've got the green, the purple, and the red. So that's our high poly done. Let's turn that off, enable our low poly, and let's also connect this one to this one. So Control J. Let's call that parts low, so it matches the high poly version there. And I want to select the blade, click a new, add a new material, and call this hand blade, just like that. Let's make this like a grey color for now. Let's copy that, put it in there. And with that done, let's select these objects and then that one last. Press Ctrl L and link the materials. So now each of these has the same hand blade material on there. So just to recap, on our high poly, we've given different materials with different colors. On our low poly, we've given each of these parts the same material, and I've called that hand blade. That's done. Let's jump over to the next part. Now that we're ready to export to FBX, let's select all of our objects, like so. So we select the high and the low, all of those. Head over to File, Export, FBX. Just go with hand blade and put that in there. Let's do that. So the options here, make sure you have on selected objects, just there. And everything else should be at default. And let's save that. Right, I'll see you in Marmoset Toolbag.